As the investigation widens, names begin to surface, cities recorded once, then lost to time, like breaths erased from history. In ancient Mesopotamian texts, cities are listed that never appear again. In the Indus Valley, urban centers show signs of abrupt abandonment, but no signs of warfare. The streets were left clean, homes sealed, and valuables untouched. This wasn't a panic, not looting. It was a decisive departure. Here, at these excavation grids, archaeologists kneel in silence, confronting not debris, but absence. These places didn't decay into ruin. They froze, as if their inhabitants received a warning so overwhelming that staying was impossible. Ancient chronicles often describe celestial signs before a disappearance: strange lights in the sky, the ground trembling, or the air turning to poison. Once dismissed as superstition, these details now align with known natural phenomena: volcanic gas releases, methane eruptions, or silent seismic events. Entire populations could have fled or perished without leaving a trace of visible damage. The line between myth and science begins to blur. It seems ancient observers weren't just telling stories. They were recording real events in symbolic language, telling us that cities can vanish not through destruction, but through conditions that make life impossible in mere hours. Climate instability is a key suspect. Rapid environmental shifts can collapse an entire urban system overnight. A sudden drought empties reservoirs. A flash flood contaminates the water supply. A single cold snap shatters agriculture for a season. Looking at these dried riverbeds and buried canals, we see evidence of once thriving infrastructure rendered useless almost instantly. Ice core data and sediment layers confirm these episodes of abrupt climate change, and they line up perfectly with the abandonment timelines. It's the speed that's terrifying. A slow decline leaves traces, but sudden change erases everything, forcing people to leave behind their homes, their routines, and even their memories, just to survive. But nature alone can't explain every disappearance. Political and social forces can erase cities just as deliberately. Ruling powers sometimes ordered mass evacuations to control populations, redirect trade, or suppress rebellion, later striking these cities from official records. Over generations, this absence becomes a mystery. In imperial archives, we find gaps where documents should be. A city doesn't need to burn to vanish. It just needs to be abandoned and forgotten by those who control what is remembered. The idea of a city disappearing overnight suddenly feels less like a legend and more disturbingly plausible. Cities are fragile agreements between environment, governance, and belief. When one pillar fails, the entire structure dissolves. Beneath this empty horizon, foundations lie buried, unseen but real. Each vanished city represents not just a loss of life, but a lost warning. If entire worlds can disappear without a trace, then history may be far less complete than we assume, shaped as much by what vanished silently as by what endured. There are cities that exist only in whispers, in forbidden texts, and the margins of history. These are not the ruins we know, celebrated by archaeologists. These are the ones that vanished. Official accounts call them myths, fantasies dreamed up by ancient priests, travelers, and scholars. But across cultures, the stories are eerily consistent, sprawling urban centers that disappeared in an instant, swallowed by mist, buried by sand, or consumed by fire from the sky. These texts were often labeled heretical, their authors silenced. After all, they challenged the accepted timeline of history, hinting at advanced civilizations that rose and fell long before our own. Yet they describe incredible details, sophisticated water systems, intricate urban planning, and populations numbering in the tens of thousands. Are these the hallmarks of pure imagination, or the fragments of a world deliberately erased? When a city vanishes physically and then intellectually, it becomes a ghost, haunting the footnotes of our past. What's truly unsettling is the pattern that emerges from these suppressed accounts. Some describe orderly evacuations led by an elite class who seemed to possess foreknowledge of the coming catastrophe. Did they read the stars, or did they inherit some secret knowledge? The implication is chilling that a select few knew disaster was imminent and chose secrecy over a warning. They ensured their own survival. While entire populations disappeared from the historical record overnight, their existence reduced to rumor. Ancient maps reinforce this possibility. They show coastlines that no longer exist, rivers flowing through modern deserts, and great cities where today there is only emptiness. For centuries, these maps were dismissed as fantasy, but now modern technology is revealing something strange. Satellite and sonar imagery show anomalies buried deep beneath the sand and submerged under the waves, right where these phantom cities were marked. The maps weren't prophecy, they were memory, copies of older charts that recorded a world before it was changed forever. Sometimes the disappearance wasn't just sudden. It was deliberate. Archaeologists have found sites that were intentionally sealed, entire cities buried under thick layers of clay or stone, as if to prevent anyone from ever returning. This wasn't just abandonment, it was a ritual of concealment. Was it to contain a plague, a curse? Or was it to erase a political rival? The act of burying a city suggests a deep-seated fear, a desire not only to forget, but to protect future generations from knowledge deemed too dangerous or terrifying. When we search for lost cities, we often look for ruins, for the skeletons of buildings left behind by time. But what if a city disappears completely, swallowed by the earth without a trace? The ground itself can be the most silent witness. In some parts of the world, the earth can suddenly rupture, opening up sinkholes so vast they consume entire districts in mere hours. Imagine the ground liquefying beneath your feet, swallowing structures whole, and then closing back up, leaving behind a smooth, undisturbed landscape for future generations to wonder at. It's a disappearance so clean, so absolute, that it erases not just the city, but the very story of its existence. There are no dramatic ruins, only a hauntingly empty horizon. Volcanic events offer another form of silent erasure. We think of Pompeii, frozen in time, but that's the exception. More often, a volcano doesn't burn a city to the ground. Instead, it releases a breathless cloud of ash and toxic gas. These invisible killers can sweep through streets, leaving buildings perfectly intact, but utterly empty. The population either flees or perishes, and over time, fine layers of ash gently bury the silent city, preserving it deep beneath the surface. Core samples from these regions reveal thin, dark lines of ash-only gravestone for an entire settlement that vanished not in fire, but in a whisper of deadly air. Later cultures might stumble upon the emptiness and call it a myth, never realizing they are walking over a ghost. But of all the natural forces, water is the most efficient eraser. It doesn't just bury, it removes and reshapes everything. A tsunami or a flash flood can obliterate a coastal city in minutes, scattering debris for miles and carrying its people far from their homes. When the waters recede, they leave behind a scoured landscape, often with nothing recognizable. Underwater drones now explore the depths, finding scattered stones and unnatural-looking formations, the faint fingerprints of drowned cities protected by silt and sea. Ancient harbors now lie miles inland or far out at sea, their locations lost to shifting coastlines. History simply forgot them, mistaking their absence for non-existence. The human response to such a catastrophe also helps to erase the memory. Survivors rarely rebuild on a site of such immense trauma. The abandoned city becomes a taboo place, a land of ghosts, and nature quickly moves in to reclaim it. Jungles grow over stone foundations, and deserts smooth streets into dunes. When a city is abandoned all at once, it breaks the chain of history. There are no layers of new life built upon the old, making it nearly invisible to archaeologists. This sudden stop, this lack of continuity, becomes its own kind of disappearance. The absence of evidence reinforces the illusion that nothing was ever there. These vanished cities offer a sobering lesson. Disappearance doesn't require a deep mystery, only speed. When nature acts faster than human memory can record, the result isn't always ruin, but a profound and lasting silence. Our bustling urban lives depend on a fragile balance. When that balance breaks, the Earth doesn't need centuries to erase our existence. It only needs a few moments. And by the time history even notices we're gone, it might be too late to ever know what was lost. For centuries, we believed lost cities were just that. Lost, swallowed by jungles, buried by sand, gone forever. But what if they never truly vanished? What if they just became invisible, leaving behind ghostly fingerprints only modern technology can see? Today, the search for these ghost cities has entered a new era. We're not just looking for ruins anymore. We're hunting for absence, for the subtle patterns that betrayal leaves on the landscape. Using satellite imaging, thermal analysis, and ground-penetrating radar, scientists can now peer beneath forests, fields, and even our own urban sprawl. They look for anomalies. Straight lines where nature prefers curves, faint temperature shifts that hint at buried stone, and soil disturbances that trace the paths of ancient streets. These tools turn empty land into layered maps of human history, resurrecting places that time and memory have erased. It's like having X-ray vision for the entire planet. Artificial intelligence is taking this even further. AI algorithms sift through immense global datasets, finding connections a human researcher might miss. They detect repeating urban layouts, forgotten trade routes, and defensive structures shared by cities thousands of miles apart. A disturbing pattern is emerging. These cities didn't disappear by chance. They were built in vulnerable zones along volatile fault lines or in the path of predictable disasters. It seems ancient planners either understood these risks and accepted them, or circumstances changed faster than they could ever adapt. Technology isn't romanticizing this loss, it's quantifying it, showing us just how often civilization has blinked out of existence. But uncovering these truths isn't always welcome. Acknowledging a vanished city can challenge modern land claims and rewrite national histories. Governments sometimes hesitate. Development projects quietly pave over anomalies, and researchers find their access mysteriously denied. It's often easier to build over the past than to dig it up. And when these discoveries do make headlines, they're often sensationalized, stripped of their true meaning and presented as mere curiosities rather than the warnings they are. This brings us to a chilling realization. These lost cities aren't just relics of a primitive past, they're mirrors reflecting our own vulnerabilities. We can now see where ancient metropolises lie buried right beneath our modern ones, repeating the same patterns of risk. We have the technology to see what was lost, but the real question remains: will we learn from their disappearance, or are we destined to repeat it? Have you ever considered why history feels so complete? In museums and textbooks, timelines stretch unbroken, telling neat stories of rise and fall. But what about the stories that don't fit? What about the cities that didn't fall but simply vanished? The idea that entire populations can disappear without a trace is unsettling. It suggests our own world might not be as permanent as we believe. Absence, after all, is much harder to display than destruction. A ruined city leaves behind stones and artifacts, things we can label and put in a glass case. But a city that vanishes leaves nothing but an unnerving silence and an empty space on the map. This lack of evidence creates a bias in history, focusing only on what survived, not what was lost completely and without explanation. This silence isn't always accidental. Acknowledging a vanished city can be politically inconvenient. If a thriving metropolis existed where official records show only empty land, it could challenge modern claims to territory and heritage. Imagine the legal and cultural questions it would raise. To avoid this discomfort, it's often easier for governments to just not look at. Suppression doesn't need a grand conspiracy, just a shared incentive to maintain the status quo. When uncertainty threatens legitimacy, unanswered questions are quietly set aside. Investigations stall, funding dries up, and the mystery remains buried, not by dirt, but by paperwork and policy. This avoidance is also deeply human. We crave stories with clear beginnings, middles, and ends. A city wiped out by a volcano or a war offers a grim kind of closure. We can understand the cause and effect. But a city that disappears overnight, that leaves a profound sense of unease. It defies our need for resolution and forces us to confront the idea that some things are simply unknowable. It suggests that our own complex systems could be just as fragile. To protect our sense of control, we subconsciously distance ourselves from these narratives, dismissing them as myths or legends. So, these vanished cities are more than just historical curiosities. They are suppressed warnings. The silence surrounding them isn't empty. It's an active force shaping what we believe is possible. By ignoring these disappearances, we choose comfort over awareness. The question isn't whether it could happen again. The real question is whether we were willing to listen to the silence before it's all that is left. Thanks. As we sift through the ruins of history, we find a curious pattern, a rhythm to disappearance that echoes across civilizations. Vanished cities aren't random, they cluster. When you map their locations, climates, and timelines, they gather like moths to a flame around fault lines, floodplains, and resource-rich coasts. These were the places of abundance, the centers of opportunity, but also zones of immense risk. Humans have always built where life is richest, even when the danger was known, trusting in stability until the ground beneath them shifted too quickly. History, it seems, is written by the survivors, not by those who were erased. But the lost ones did leave warnings, embedded in myth and stone. Look closely at the ruins. Elevated platforms, escape routes aligned toward water. Legends of forbidden lands. These are the cultural memories of sudden loss. Over generations, however, the original meanings faded. The practical warnings became mere rituals. The knowledge devolved into superstition. Some cities vanished simply because later inhabitants forgot why their ancestors chose to build somewhere else. Disappearance, then, isn't a single event. It's a slow process of forgetting, culminating in one irreversible night. We concentrate millions in vulnerable locations, all dependent on intricate systems we believe are unshakable. The story of cities that vanished overnight doesn't end when we find their ruins. It doesn't end when we think we've found the answers. The real story begins with the questions that remain, questions that refuse to be answered. These places weren't myths. They were real, lived-in cities, home to generations who believed in their permanence just as strongly as we believe in ours. Their sudden disappearance is a stark reminder that the continuity we take for granted is fragile, hanging by a thread we often can't even see. History loves to record triumphs because they leave something behind: monuments, records, legacies. But disappearance leaves only silence. And to understand silence, you need imagination, humility, and the courage to face a mystery without a solution. When we reflect on these vanished cities, we have to reconsider how we write history itself. After all, survival determines what gets remembered, not significance. What remains shapes our story, while what disappears vanishes from the narrative, leaving behind only an echo. But even echoes can shape the future in ways we don't recognize. We try so hard to preserve everything. We build massive archives and digital data centers, convinced that if we save enough information, we can prevent loss. But does preservation truly equal understanding? Or are we just building a more sophisticated way to delay the inevitable act of forgetting? The stories of these cities warn us that data alone won't save us. Speed and scale can overwhelm even our most advanced systems, especially when our confidence makes us blind to the real dangers. There's a moral weight to this as well. Forgotten cities mean forgotten lives, entire communities erased without a trace, without acknowledgement. These were not just abstract populations. They were families with their own routines, their own ambitions, their own dreams. When a city disappears, it teaches us a difficult lesson in empathy through absence. It reminds us that progress, if measured only by what we build and what endures, ignores the immense cost of what was lost too quickly to be properly mourned. The conditions that made cities vanish in the past haven't gone away. Climate volatility, geological instability, and the sheer concentration of human life continue to create a precarious balance. Look at any modern skyline. At night it's beautiful, but it's also incredibly vulnerable. This isn't about predicting disaster. It's about making a choice. The past shows us that collapse doesn't always announce itself with dramatic warnings. Often, life just continues as normal, right up until the moment it doesn't. The most important lessons aren't found in history's loudest moments, but in its quietest, most unsettling chapters. Somewhere beneath our own streets, other cities lie buried, silent proof that disappearance has happened before. Whether future generations will one day walk over our foundations, completely unaware of our existence, depends entirely on what we choose to remember and act on now. Cities don't vanish because they are weak. They vanish because the world can change faster than our beliefs can adapt. And the silence they leave behind is not empty. It's waiting. And history has shown us, again and again, that it is patient. Thank you for watching.